Hey, everybody. Good morning, church. Hope you're doing great and ready to get into the morning Devo with Bo. November 15th. I've had to do some computer changes lately. Lots been, it seems like, sometimes when it rains, it pours, and I had a computer failure as well. But hey, that's no problem. We could fix that, get that going. And just all your love for my mom over these last months has been absolutely precious. So thankful for you all. So I can't tell you how much I'm thankful for everybody who's been there over this year. It's been such a long year. And it's neat to know my mom is no longer in the pain that she was in, a tremendous amount of pain over the course of her this year with that cancer or the different cancers in her body. And just to have her no longer have to deal with that is a pretty awesome feeling, actually. Pretty rejoicing in that. So glad to be back in the morning Devo as well. And again, this is my Devo time. It's my time to get in the Word and enjoy the Scriptures. And I bring you guys along with me. And you could always check it out on my YouTube channel at Bo Willette. That is where all the archives of the Devos are kept. So you could always check those out. And also, that's where I go live as well. So when Facebook's not working, sometimes YouTube's working a little better. So check it out. So we're in 1 Samuel chapter 29, and let's start reading. It says, "The entire Philistine army now mobilized at Apex, and the Israelites camped at the spring of Jezreel." So remember, they're going to actually go to war here, okay? And then it says, "As the Philistine rulers were leading out their troops in groups of hundreds and thousands, David and his men marched at the rear with King Achish." Now, this must have been an interesting situation, huh? I mean, here you have the Philistine rulers, leading out their troops in groups of hundreds and thousands, and David and his men are marching with the Philistines. That sounds so weird, right? You think of David as kind of the Philistine slayer, right? Killing Goliath. And so it's hard for us to imagine that David is actually in the military of the Philistines right now. And it says, "But the Philistine commanders demanded, 'What are these Hebrews doing here?'" So some people were really skeptical of David, and if David was really being honest. And by golly, they should, right? David hasn't been the most honest guy at all. And his actions have been, man, pretty radical. I mean, really radical. Sometimes we underplay just how radical of the life of David is. But, lying about what you're doing when you're killing, hundreds of people at a time is, it's beyond our imagination, really. That kind of military conquest, that kind of bloodthirsty attitude that David had. I think if we met someone like David today, we would probably want to avoid this person as much as we could. And that's hard for us to kind of comprehend in our minds, that God is gracious on this person and God is merciful on this person. How can this be? Well, we have remember, all the writings of David in what's called the Psalms, and we get really David's inner heart. And this is really interesting, but you can have a person who's on the outside doing all kinds of interesting things, but on the inside, man, they're trying to figure out their walk with God. They're crying out to the Lord. They're leaning on the Lord. They're wanting to know God's word greater. Wow. Sometimes we can really, judge just on the outward, can we? And we forget all the inward things that are going on in that person. Well, David was one of those guys where, certainly a lot of people judged him. And some of the Philistine army who he was hanging out with were really skeptical of him. And Achish told them, "This is David, the servant of King Saul of Israel. He's been with me for years, and I've never found a single fault in him from the day he arrived until now, or the day he arrived until today." So Achish the king of Gath sticks up for David and says, hey, David's been a good guy. And, here Achish is trying to convince his fellow, padres in the military that David's okay to be with them in this military conquest of the promised land. Very interesting, right? It says, but the Philistine commanders were angry. Send him back to town, the town you've given him. They demanded. He can't go into battle with us. What if he turns against us in battle and becomes our adversary? Is there any better way for him to reconcile himself with his master than by handing our heads over to him? Isn't this the same David about whom the women of Israel sing in their dances? Saul has killed his thousands, but David his 10,000s. So they know the history of this guy, David. They know that David has slain many Philistines in his day in the military of Israel. And so they go, hey, isn't this the perfect way for David to kind of, help Saul, is by kind of infiltrating the Philistine army and then coming against them and then, sending our heads, him turning against us and sending our heads to Saul. Isn't that how, like a stealth mission maybe he's on? So they're really thinking, man, right, properly. And what happens here? Achish finally summoned David and said to him, I swear by the Lord that you have been a trustworthy ally. I think you should go up with me in battle, for I've never found a single flaw in you from the day you arrived until today. But the other Philistine rulers won't bear it. Please don't upset them, but go back quietly. So Achish says to David, hey, I think you should go with me in battle. I've never found anything wrong with you. But you know what? The other Philistine rulers just will not do it. So why don't you go back to your people, right? Notice that's what he says. Don't upset them, but go back quietly. So what have I done to deserve this treatment? David demanded. What have you ever found in your servant that I can't go and fight the enemies of my lord, the king? Man, it sounds really weird. David sounds like he's totally defending the idea of going to war against Israel, his own people. David's offended that people are saying things about him. And this is what I think I have to think about this morning too, is like, do I get offended? How easily am I offended? David, we've seen that has a track record of where he restrains himself well in some moments, but in other moments he is super offended and super agitated to where it moves him to extreme actions, to where he does horrible things. And, I don't want to be like that. I want to be temperate in all things. The New Testament talks about that, being temperate, being balanced, having a temperance attitude in life and heart. And, am I that way? Am I someone who has that kind of self-control in my behavior, where I can hold back, where during the conversation I don't have to just butt in and say everything I want to say, make all the arguments I need to make, that kind of thing, diss on that person, diss on that other person. How am I in my balance, just my behavioral balance? Is there a good balance in my life? Do I know when to share and then when to take a step back and be patient? Do I know how, to act when someone says something offensive to me? Or do I just react in anger, right? Or wrath, The New Testament tells me and tells you, right, that the wrath of humans does not produce the righteousness of God. Meaning I'm never going to become righteous. I'm never going to get to a place of goodness, of righteousness, by moving out of my wrath, right, towards people. Why? Because it's always going to go in ways that are too much. Instead of stopping at justice, I will seek revenge. I will go more. And that's how it is. And that's how it was when we were kids, right? You hit me on the arm, I hit you harder on the arm. You hit me harder on the arm, I hit you harder on the arm. And then pretty soon we're scruffing, right? We're fighting, right? Because we always want to one-up everything. And this is how humans are in everything. We always are trying to get at one another more and more and more. This isn't the way of rightness, right? Goodness. But we have to be able to understand that that wrath that's in us does not produce goodness. And we have to be able to take a step back. And that's why in the book of James, New Testament book of wisdom, it says be quick to what? Listen. And then it says be slow to speak. Yeah, but what does David do? Man, Achish says, hey, I'd love for you to be here, but, the other commanders don't trust you. And he gets mad. David just flies off the handle. What have I ever done? What have you ever found in your servant that I can't go and fight with you? But Achish insisted, as far as I am concerned, you're as perfect as an angel of God. But the Philistine commanders are afraid to have you with them in the battle. Now get up early in the morning and leave with your men as soon as it gets light. So David and his men headed back into the land of the Philistines, while the Philistine army went on to Jezreel. It sounds really interesting that David, had this really interesting situation going on. But it all started with him, running from Saul, and then him, lying to Achish. He's never been honest with Achish about what he's been doing with his time. And, all these lies, all this deception has built up to this moment. If anything, David could have took a step back and said to Achish, hey, Achish, you know what? I've been lying to you. You think that I'm on your side, but you know what I've been doing for the last year and a half? I've been raiding non-Israel tribes and wiping them out all over the area. I've been riding out into different areas and just wiping out man and woman, adults, so that they don't come and tell you. He doesn't say that. He never does that. And boy, dishonesty, man, that can really mess things up. Achish doesn't have the full picture. He doesn't know what's going on with David. And that's because David just hasn't been really honest. And how many people don't know the full picture in my life? How many people don't know me? How many things have I withheld from people? So that they think one way about me when I'm really another way. And that's something I need to look at. And I need to always examine, am I being real, right? Do you guys know me? Do you know my struggles? Do you know what I deal with? Those kind of things. Or do you think that, do you see me as someone that is this certain, stained glass way? It's like the stained glass version of that person. When we think of a stained glass, we think of like the perfect Jesus, the stained glass version, of him on the cross, and there's one little blood trickling down from his cheek. And we know that's not true. When Jesus died on the cross, it was a horrendous sight to be seen, right? And so, we want to be real people. And the way we can do that is by simply just being, honest with people and just say, hey, in our conversations with them, in our walks with them, nothing's wrong with us saying, hey, can you pray for me? I'm struggling with something, or I'm dealing with something, and let them, and that way in your guys' prayer lives, you guys understand one another. Everything's very out in the open and that kind of thing. And I think that's just an important way to walk, and it gives you a lot of peace and serenity. You don't have to try to be something that you're not, because, really there's other things going on. And David definitely seems to have kind of two worlds going, right? He's got his world of deception, and then he's got this world where he's really crying out to God, but he's so broken. You see his heart is just ailing him in many ways, and probably because of all this dishonesty that's going on in his world. So anyway, being real, man. Oh boy, that's so important. Being real. So it's good to be back in the morning Devo. Just get in the Word a little bit and enjoy it. It's neat to see the narrative of David, and the Bible puts a lot of emphasis on this person, and we'll see why as it goes on, as it continues. So you guys have a great day. Thanks so much for joining me. Thanks once again for everything with my mom. And just be rejoicing. She's where we want to be, in the presence of the Lord. So take care. Bye-bye.